nocturnal emission, informally known as a wet dream, is a spontaneous orgasm during sleep that includes ejaculation for a male, or vaginal wetness or an orgasm, or both, for a female. Nocturnal emissions are most common during adolescence and early young adult years, but they may happen any time after puberty. It is possible for men to wake up during a wet dream or simply to sleep through it, but for women, some researchers have added the requirement that she should also awaken during the orgasm and perceive that the orgasm happened before it counts as a wet dream. Vaginal lubrication alone does not mean that the female had an orgasm. Due to the difficulty in collecting ejaculate produced during nocturnal emissions, relatively few studies have examined its composition. In the largest study, which included nocturnal emission samples from 10 men with idiopathic anejaculation, the semen concentration was equivalent to samples obtained from the same men by penile vibratory stimulation, although the percentage of sperm which were mobile and which were of normal morphology were higher in the nocturnal emission specimens. In a detailed study, men and women reported that approximately 8% of their everyday dreams contained some form of sexual-related activity. 4% of sex dreams among both men and women resulted in orgasms. The frequency of nocturnal emissions is highly variable. Some reported that it is due to being sexually inactive for a period of 1-2 weeks, with no engagement in either intercourse or masturbation. Some men have experienced large numbers of nocturnal emissions as teenagers, while others have never experienced one. In the U.S., 83% of men will experience nocturnal emissions at some time in their life. For males who have experienced nocturnal emissions, the mean frequency ranges from 0.36 times per week, about once every 3 weeks, for single 15-year-old males to 0.18 times per week, about once every 5.5 weeks, for 40-year-old single males. For married males, the mean ranges from 0.23 times per week, about once per month, for 19-year-old married males to 0.15 times per week, about once every 2 months, for 50-year-old married males. In some parts of the world, nocturnal emissions are more common. For example, in Indonesia, surveys have shown that 97% of men experience nocturnal emissions by the age of 24. Some men have the emissions only at a certain age, while others have them throughout their lives following puberty. The frequency that one has nocturnal emissions has not been conclusively linked to frequency of masturbation. Alfred Kinsey found there may be some correlation between the frequencies of masturbation and the frequencies of nocturnal emissions. In general, the males who have the highest frequencies of nocturnal emissions may have somewhat lower rates of masturbation. One factor that can affect the number of nocturnal emissions men have is whether they take testosterone-based drugs. In a 1998 study by Finkelstein et al., the number of boys reporting nocturnal emissions drastically increased as their testosterone doses were increased, from 17% of subjects with no treatment to 90% of subjects at a high dose. 13% of males experience their first ejaculation as a result of a nocturnal emission. Kinsey found that males experiencing their first ejaculation through a nocturnal emission were older than those experiencing their first ejaculation by means of masturbation. The study indicates that such a first ejaculation resulting from a nocturnal emission was delayed a year or more from what would have been developmentally possible for such males through physical stimulation. The frequency of nocturnal emissions is variable, just as with men. In 1953, sex researcher Alfred Kinsey found that nearly 40% of the women he interviewed have had one or more nocturnal orgasms or wet dreams. Those who reported experiencing these said that they usually had them several times a year, and that they first occurred as early as 13, and usually by the age of 21. Kinsey defined female nocturnal orgasm as sexual arousal during sleep that awakens one to perceive the experience of orgasm. Studies have found that more boys and men have spontaneous nocturnal sexual experiences than girls and women, but female wet dreams may be more difficult to identify with certainty than male wet dreams, because ejaculation is usually associated with male orgasm, while vaginal lubrication may not indicate orgasm. Sexual activity is a commonly reported theme of lucid dreams. Lauberg, Greenleaf, and Kajersky 1983 undertook a pilot study to determine the extent to which subjectively experienced sexual activity during REM lucid dreaming would be reflected in physiological responses. Since women report more orgasms in dreams than men do, we began with a female subject. We recorded many different aspects of her physiology that would normally be affected by sexual arousal, including respiration, heart rate, vaginal muscle tone, and vaginal pulse amplitude. The experiment called for her to make specific eye movement signals at the following points: when she realized she was dreaming, when she began sexual activity in the dream, and when she experienced orgasm. She reported a lucid dream in which she carried out the experimental task exactly as agreed upon. Our analysis revealed significant correspondences between the dream activities she reported and all but one of the physiological measures. During the 15-second section of her physiological record, which she signaled as the moment of orgasm, her vaginal muscle activity, vaginal pulse amplitude, and respiration rate reached their highest values of the night, and they also were considerably elevated in comparison to the rest of the REM period. Contrary to expectation, heart rate increased only slightly. Lauberg, S., Greenleaf, W., Kajersky, B. 1983. Physiological responses to dreamed sexual activity during lucid REM sleep. Psychophysiology, 20, 454-455.